I want you to picture this hypothetical for a sec. Imagine you are trying to create a successful prequel. Now, for argument's sake, let's define this as something that establishes meaningful backstory while also building upon existing continuity. Character molding and world building, if you will. As a storyteller, how would you go about this task while also making it so that it isn't boring for the audience? Remember, this is a prequel. We know how these characters and this world will turn out. Giving it some thought, you can see how this is a challenging task. It seems that there's some conflict of interest at work here. You don't want to tread old ground, but you also kinda need to in a way. But let's hold off on this for a sec and discuss something that I'm sure has no bearing on the answer to the question that I just posed. Yakuza is a weird series, and we touched upon it briefly on the channel with the Bear Bites Mini on Like a Dragon. That still doesn't do justice to convey how insane these games are. Hulking men in diapers and epic cabaret club battles are just the tip of the iceberg. You can even fight a bear. The amount of anxiety that this footage gives me is insane. But underneath all that weirdness, these games hold some beautiful design secrets under the hood. One of these, in my opinion, has played a hand in elevating a specific game into fan favorite status, even transcending the series itself. This game in particular is Yakuza 0, and this technique is convergent narratives. And I promise we will not bring up that song in this video. But I will bring up this one.
Justice will break in the law, break in the world, 壊せ、切り裂けてんだね。
Convergent narratives. The term may sound academically heavy, but I almost guarantee that you have seen this style of storytelling in television, movies, music, and even other games. Convergent narratives, borrowing from the mathematical term, are stories that have multiple, sometimes seemingly unrelated lines in the narrative that end up converging at some moment or moments. This usually happens towards the end of the story, but there are exceptions. One example in film that comes to mind is Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction. The movie spans chapters, usually switching between main characters and their perspectives, like the hitmen Vincent and Jules, the fighter Butch, and the diner robbers. Separately, their individual stories seem loosely connected at best. But as the film goes on, showing events out of order, the audience catches on how this mess of events went about and how each story and arc connects with each other. This storytelling structure, like any good tool, has quite a few use cases. Sometimes when the narrative and themes are just too big for one character to take on, it may be best to split it up across different characters at different points. Want to get multiple perspectives on your massive complex world? Split the narrative and converge to drive home that this world is a singular unit. Most of the time, this is why convergent narratives are used in prequels of all things. We have our convergence from the audience perspective, we know where the narrative will end up. Splitting it in the prequel allows for a more dynamic storytelling experience. It shakes things up a bit and lets the audience say, oh, so that's how it happened. It breaks new ground while treading old ground. We can have our cake and eat it too. So, how does Yakuza 0 exemplify convergent narratives? In a structural sense, the game is divided into two parts. Kazuma Kiryu's story, the man who will become the main hero of the series, and Goro Majima's story, the man who will become the main anti-hero of the series. Taking place in different areas and having different goals at first, the game coaxes the audience to believe their stories are more anthology-based. This allows for the game to show what the lives of these men were like before the events we've come to accept throughout the series. But either as a veteran or a well-eyed player, we know their paths will eventually cross and their lives forever intertwined. Like, come on, we know Majima is gonna say Kiryu-chan in the first Yakuza. As the game progresses, a sense of unease is built from the stories leaving marks on the other narrative's line. Traces of Kiryu's consequences are being felt by Majima and vice versa. This all culminates into an amazing final act where both lines converge into a single climactic battle with Titanic-sized drama. And as the ashes fall, we see the Kiryu and Majima that we know and love. Most of the events in the game can be inferred to some degree, yet it's still engaging even if you knew what the final outcome was. As I stated before, we break new ground by treading old ground.
俺らにできるのは立ち止まって泣くか一歩でも前に進むかの二つだけだ
Yakuza 0 uses a convergent narrative structure to elevate itself as a prequel. While it's not a perfect game, I do consider it a perfect prequel. It tells us about the world before our own preconceptions from past games by using multiple perspectives. It tells us about the characters we adore and how they got that way in the fashion that isn't cut and dry. And it recontextualizes the series to make aspects more dynamic and deeper. For example, before Zero, Majima was just an eccentric anti-hero that was a roadblock for Kiryu at times. After Zero, without spoiling, Majima has been recontextualized to be someone who suffers from their past actions and guilt. In a sense, it makes the audience look at the franchise in a fresh and welcome viewpoint, and that's why it's considered one of the best games by the fandom. For part of that, you can thank Convergent Narratives. Thank you guys so much for making it to the end of this video, and thank you guys for being so patient on this video. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts on the topic today, so post them down in the comments. And you know it goes without saying, like, subscribe, blah blah blah, you know the rest. But until next time, Jane.